Former President Donald Trump is on tour again, and in his recent speech, he said that we should be more kind to each other. I'm just kidding. He said we should ban all of electric cars, and obviously I have a little bit of a problem with that, but he did mention one thing that I think we should take seriously and talk about. And to help me do that, the host of the State of Charge YouTube channel, Tom Moloughney, will be here to make America charge again. And as always, we're going to take questions from the live audience, and we're going to start right now. Welcome to E4 Electric, where I reveal the truth behind the electric car headlines, and if you like either one of them, the electric cars or the truth, we got both. So don't forget to click on that subscribe button that kind of looks like this. Not as cute, but still very usable. And the bell notification icon so you don't miss anything moving forward. Okay, first things first. Please don't go crazy in the chat about this. We're not discussing politics. I'm simply using what he said as something that we should talk about. And if you watch my channel for a while now, you probably know that I am an independent. Not just in politics, but, for example, in electric cars. Which means that I don't believe that in any of the instances, any party is 100% right or wrong. No person is 100% right or 100% wrong, and I don't think that's the case here. So that's what we're going to talk about. So please, I know we're talking about trigger wars here, but just contain yourself, because otherwise my producer AJ will ban you from the chat room and the channel. And of course, I can't wait to talk to Tom Moloughney, who will be here in just a second. But first, let's talk about this. Now, I'll show you the clip about what Donald Trump said. And before we get to what I actually want to talk about, there are a few things that he said that were, the bullshit. So let's get that out of the way, and then we'll get to the meat and bones of this, and Tom will jump in. So here's what he said last week.
When I was in office, gas was $1.87 a gallon. And we weren't talking about going to all electric cars, which are twice as expensive. I mean,
okay, so first of all, we were talking about electric cars. As a matter of fact, I might have a clip of someone talking about electric cars who looks amazingly similar to him. But also, electric cars were actually never twice as expensive. However, it is something that people think about because the electric cars that everybody wants to talk about are quite expensive. Tesla Model S Plaid, Lucid Air, they are very, very expensive. However, there are plenty of gas cars that are just as expensive, but this is something we should definitely mention, that the conversation started before that. But let's keep going.
Mine wanted to do something for the environment. He went out and bought a electric car.
Now, I gotta say that it's actually nice to hear that both sides do believe that electric cars is something that you do for the environment. Now, I have an admission to make, a confession, I guess. When I bought my very first Tesla back in 2012, it wasn't to save the environment. I actually wanted us to be independent from oil, which I guess this year became a big deal, and people, I think, realize that. So it's good to hear. But let's keep going.
And he made a certain trip. I won't say from where. Kentucky. I won't say from where. And he's a good person. He wants to do what's well. Now he understands. Not so good. And he bought an electric car, and he made the trip often from Kentucky to Washington, and he made it, and he'd drive down and put the car away and drive back. He was getting like 38 miles a gallon, and it was fine. And then he goes to hybrids and all the other things they can do. But he...
All right, so that's another thing. First of all, I think it was stupid of EPA or anybody to even talk about MPG, which is miles per gallon, when it comes to electric cars. That's just stupid. We should never done it. I understand they have a reason for their calculations, but should never done it. Now, but even with the MPG ratings that EPA has, by far the worst electric car in terms of consumption and efficiency. I believe it's Audi e-tron, and it's nowhere near 38 miles per gallon. I think it's around 50 or 40 something. So that's already not exactly true. But after that, he did mention something that I want to talk about, and I think it's important. And I'll play you the rest of the clip, but before that, a quick reminder that this video is brought to you by Flow. If you're looking for one of the most elegant designs for your home charger, the Flow Home X5 was made for you, featuring beautiful, sturdy 100% aluminum casing. Get your exclusive discount in the description of this video. And by NeoCharge, you can charge 2 cars at the same time without spending a ton of money on rewiring your home. All you need is the smart splitter from NeoCharge. Get one today and use the discount code in the description of this video. All right, so let's get to the most important point of his speech. Like I said, think what you want about Donald Trump, but he does, whether you like it or don't like it, reflect a good portion of our population's opinion. And this is where we should pay attention. So here we go.
Wanted to go all electric because he wants to save our country, wants to save the atmosphere. And he called me, he said, I'm exhausted. Why? He said, this damn trip took me forever. I'd drive for 2 hours and then I'd have to have my car charged. And in 2 cases, I couldn't find a place to charge it, but even if I could, it took me more time to charge the damn car than I could spend in it driving. He said, it took me 2.5 times. Please, please, let's get rid of this stuff.
Okay, so now, obviously he's exaggerating a little, as always, but he does bring a good point, because let's be honest, right? Let's just be honest here. The biggest issues that I think a good amount of the population still has is the long distance charging. But before that, I think I promised I'm going to play you a clip of Trump, and this is the clip from a debate with Joe Biden from the election. Remember how he said that he just doesn't like electric cars? So let me play you a clip that you might find interesting. So let's do that.
And I'm okay with electric cars, too. I think I'm all for electric cars. I've given big incentives for electric cars.
All right. Now, of course, if you know anything about the incentives for electric cars, that was actually during the Obama administration, and it was started with during George W. Bush administration. So it's actually one of those beautiful collabs between the 2 administrations that actually produced the EV tax, which by the way is pretty much being wiped out. Oh, one thing I didn't mention is that if this live stream abruptly ends, it's because we are having rolling blackouts here in California because. Somehow we still want to only sell electric cars by 2035, but every time it's a little hot outside, our entire infrastructure craps out and we have to have rolling blackouts. But there's a whole point for a different day. Now, by the way, Elon Musk, and I think this whole thing that Trump's talking about electric cars, it's because of a bit of a beef that they're having with Elon Musk. Elon Musk was actually one of Trump's advisors in the beginning of Trump's administration, and he ended up quitting when Trump withdrew from the Paris Agreement, and ever since they've been going back and forth. Now, another thing that has happened during Trump's administration was the Lordstown Motors was formed as they ended up purchasing the plant from General Motors. Now, Trump was really big about not basically taking jobs out of good auto manufacturing and having it somewhere else. And so when GM was closing their factory, they ended up actually selling it to this new company, Lordstown Motors. And Trump actually hosted them at the White House and said a lot of nice things about electric cars. I think he forgot to mention that we should get rid of them, but it was a good meeting. And I just interviewed that's the previous CEO right there next to Trump, Steve Burns. He's been on my show a couple of times, but I had the current CEO of Lordstown Motors as well a couple of weeks ago, and it does look like they're going in production. So that's really cool. But it was a great deal for GM because it cost them less money to actually invest essentially in in Lordstown than to decommission the plant. So that was a good deal for everybody. Trump looked good, GM looked good, the new company looked good. So it was a win for everybody. So, but nevertheless, my point is that long distance charging is a problem. Even when I bought my very first Tesla in 2012, one of a million questions people could have asked about is you know, people always asked, Alex, but you know, what about going to Los Angeles? You know, and that was, and that's still the question even today. So, and that's very unfortunate. Now, of course, the question shifted from can you to how much time you're going to spend charging. And that's where even I have a problem with it, because when I moved to Sacramento and I knew I would be going back and forth between Sacramento and Silicon Valley, I ended up buying a Chevy Volt, which was a plug-in hybrid, and a lot of people gave me crap, and I said, I'm sorry, I care about the environment 90% of the time, but another 10% of the time, I care about my time. So when I go to the Bay Area, instead of, you know, 2 hours, now it's 2 hours and 45 minutes, because charging Tesla at that time was a little bit longer. If I go to Los Angeles, you know, I would usually make it by 1 o'clock, because you kind of want to, you know, come in a little bit later so there's no traffic. But then with all the charging, instead of 1 o'clock, all of a sudden you come in at 3 o'clock sometimes. Sometimes there would be lines at the superchargers at that time, and that still is a problem here and there. So I said, I'm sorry, sometimes I just need to use a little bit of gas because I got to get to places and I still have to live my life. Just like my delivery trucks that are delivering my stuff from Amazon, they right now run on gas, and the planes that I fly. So you just can't switch all the way. However, I believe there is a solution. And it is something that for some reason a lot of people are resisting, but it is a battery swap. And the company that has done it the best is NIO. Unfortunately, just in China, but they have over 200, I believe, swapping stations, and they're now building them in Europe as they're expanding in Europe. The beauty of the battery swap is that you can swap your battery faster than you can fuel a gas car. And that is something that I believe holding a lot of people back, and just generally holding electric cars from being better than gas cars in every single way, which I think is very important when you're introducing a new product and a new concept to the market. So not only that, you can also change the sizes of the battery. So for example, if you're just driving around and it's your everyday commute, you can have a small battery where you need only maybe 50 miles of range. But if you want to go on a family vacation to, let's say, Los Angeles, you can put a bigger battery in, and of course pay a little bit more, but nevertheless you can leverage that. And another thing that people are afraid of, you know, battery degradation. Well, if it's not your battery, you don't have to care. Now, there's another company, Ample, in San Francisco, that is doing the same thing. They actually have, I did a report. This is actually me filming. I did a report on them last year. They are doing it even better than NIO, I think, because they have 6 modules, battery modules, and you can only replace 1 or 2 or 3. You can leave all of them in or just one of them in. And I think this is a much, much better way of doing it now. CATL has launched very similar type of a battery. As a matter of fact, they already have a deal to produce one of the cars that are going to be running on the CATL technology. So this is kind of happening. And let's not forget who did this first, right? Let's not forget that actually Tesla was the first brand who did it. They built a battery swapping station between here and Los Angeles. I was there. It was great. They made a big deal with this video, and then all of a sudden one day they decommissioned that station, and I think it's a shame. Now, there are quite a few things that people sort of why they resist, and I can see that Jay Ramirez is asking the question. He's saying, are there enough batteries to go around to do swaps? So don't forget, if you do it right, you don't have to replace an entire battery. You can replace one small piece of the battery. As a matter of fact, the car will drive off with half of the battery it normally would have. So I can argue you might even have less batteries needed. However, here's the thing. This is where I don't like where the conversation is going, and I know Tom will jump right in on this one pretty soon. I don't care how things are going to be invented and invested to by multi-billion-dollar companies. I care what's good for the consumer. In the last 10 years, Tesla and many other companies have accomplished a lot of things that we thought weren't possible. So you know what? Get this one done. I care what's good for the consumer. I care what's good for the electric car adoption, and you'll just have to figure it out. And yeah, don't forget, these modular batteries will not to be replaced fully. As a matter of fact, instead of all of these Teslas and ID4s driving with 80 kilowatt hour battery, which none of us need on a daily basis, really pretty much none, they will be driving with just one module of 20 kilowatt hour battery. So 60 kilowatts over there are going to be stashed somewhere in those swapping stations, helping other cars, and those will be faster to charge. Now, I know Tom has something to say about this, and that's why I've had him. He is pretty much the best charging expert in the industry. So let's have him join. And Tom, welcome to the channel. As always, it's good to have you. I know before I even ask you questions, I'm sure you have many things to say about what I just talked about. So I'll give you the floor right now.
Okay, well, I'm not dead set against battery swap. I've done it in China with Neo, and it actually worked really well there. I'm just, there's a lot of problems with battery swap, and your thought process as far as you'll need less batteries is completely wrong. That's one thing I'll say is completely wrong.
Are you challenging me on math? Okay, all right.
You'll need a lot more batteries, because at any given time, all of these battery swap centers have to have dozens of extra packs sitting there and recharging, while all the cars have batteries in them because they're driving around. And now you're saying, everybody's so stressed out about range, and you're thinking that people are going to be okay with a little 10 or 20 kilowatt hour battery pack, even though that they can go get another battery when they need it. They're not going to want to have to think about that. And if they suddenly need to go far, they don't want to have to drive to a battery swap station that's 20 minutes away, wait online because there's 6 other EVs in front of them to get 3 more modules added. They would just want to have their car ready to go all the time.
Well, hold on. Now, you're making a lot of assumptions, I think, here. First of all, you're making the same argument that people who, that Trump was talking about making, basically saying, oh, there's charging stations, they're so far away, 20 minutes away, who wants to do that? Well, build the infrastructure where they're not 20 minutes away. There will be battery swap stations, just as many of them as gas stations, and you just drive in there and they're not 20 minutes away. They're like a minute away. And yes, you drive out of the house and realize that today is the only day out of the entire week or maybe a month where you actually need a bigger battery. So instead of charging it, you just go and get 2 or 3 modules. It takes 1 minute. You don't have to get out of the car, unlike on the gas pump, and off you go. And mathematically, if you think about it, there will be more batteries stashed at those charging stations than in cars. So you won't technically need to make more batteries.
Well, I do think you will need to make more batteries, Alex, but those batteries could be put to use. There is an advantage to this. These battery swap stations could also be using the batteries that are waiting for other cars to come as stationary energy storage. They could be actually helping the grid if we get to a point where you're saying there's, battery swap stations everywhere. If they're 1 minute away, don't forget, you have to have so many of these out there and all of them are going to have to be filled with batteries. You could use them. I'm not convinced that the American public is going to want to lease batteries, that they're going to want to have a battery put in their car that they spent money on that might be old and degraded. Now, I know you can swap it and get a new one, but with how fast charging is becoming, if all EVs took, if it was an hour or 2 hours to charge an EV on a road trip, then, absolutely. But we're getting to the point now where it's minutes. The Lucid Air, I replaced 200 miles of driving range in 12 minutes on a Lucid Air.
Tom, hold on a second. I got to stop you. There's just too many things that you're saying kind of one by one. First of all, I think there's nothing wrong with replacing gas stations with battery swapping stations. And yes, they will have a bunch of batteries there, and I prefer them there than in cars, decreasing the range. Just like there's a bunch of gas right now in those gas stations, then there will be batteries stacked up and maybe even helping the grid, though that is not my concern at all right now. Secondly, this is where, like, remember how Trump was saying how this, electric cars are twice as expensive? But that's the thing. We shouldn't be giving examples of a car that is twice as expensive, right? You just mentioned Lucid Air. Yes, Lucid Air charges in 16 minutes, I believe, 10 to 80 or 20 to 80. Which, first of all, you have to pay $160,000 to get that, or even $100,000 to get that. That's not realistic. But to me, 16 minutes is still 14 minutes longer than I can gas my car. And it's way too much time now. And it is if I'm paying $160,000. The common folk cars that I drive myself here, ID4, I'm sorry, I was just charging yesterday 45 minutes.
Yeah, and that's today. If you drove an EV 13 years ago when I did, it was 4 hours. They keep charging is getting faster and faster and faster. And the fact that the Lucid Air is $140,000, that's not the charging rate isn't what drove up the price on that car. It's everything else, and the fact that it has a huge battery, which is a part of why it can charge faster. But that technology is trickling down. The Kia EV6, the Hyundai Ioniq 5, they both charge 10 to 80% in 18 minutes. So and those vehicles are in the 40s, $40,000. We're going to have $25,000 EVs that charge to 80% in under 20 minutes in a couple of years. So the fact that EV fast charging is happening is getting so much faster so quickly, it's making battery swap, in my opinion, obsolete before it ever even takes off. If we could never get to this high speed charging, then I would agree with you. But look at what GM's doing with Ultium. It charges at over 300 kilowatt. We're not going to need battery swap, Alex, in my opinion.
Well, okay, I think you're missing a couple of points. First of all, I recently interviewed the CEO of the QuantumScape, right? Probably the most promising technology right now for fast charging with solid-state batteries. And he told me that still it's going to come down to probably 10 minutes of charging instead of 20 or so forth. It's still going to be nowhere near 2 minutes that the gassing a car or the battery swap takes. That's number one. Number two, there are other benefits. And by the way, I'm just against hauling an 80 or 100 kilowatt hour battery when you only need 5, 10, 20 kilowatts on daily basis. That's, to me, is a waste of the battery itself, and obviously it adds huge weight to the car. Without 80% of the battery that it doesn't need most of the time, it would go even further on that tiny little 20 kilowatt hour battery that I'm proposing the modules would be at. So that's just number one. Number two, there are other benefits to battery swap, right? So first of all, your battery will be much cheaper to own or lease. Right now you have to pay for the entire battery right up front. You won't have to do it with a battery swap. You can pay for the smaller battery, probably, I don't know, $30, $40 a month. And then when you go on the road trip, then you may maybe pay $40 a weekend for a bigger battery, and then you go back.
It's going to cost more than that. It's going to cost you more. It always costs you more to rent something than to buy it. Overall, in the long run, Alex, somebody has to lose money. If it's going to cost you less, why wouldn't it just cost you less to buy it? But let's put that to the side for a second. I agree with you that smaller batteries are needed. We don't need to keep putting in larger and larger batteries. We're doing that now because public charging sucks and we don't have enough of it. Once we have ubiquitous high-speed DC fast charging all over the place, like you're talking about putting battery swap stations all over the place. If we had superchargers and DC fast chargers, ultra high-speed ones everywhere, we could have smaller battery packs. Don't forget, most people, at least the people that live in a private residence, are very rarely going to use public charging infrastructure. For those people, it would make no sense to get a battery swap, because every night they come home and plug in. But yes, the people that live in apartments that can't charge at home, even though I believe it's going to take some time, but even apartment buildings are going to have parking, charging, on-street parking. There's going to be charging stations everywhere. It's going to take us some time, but we're going to get there. I just feel like, the battery swap is solving a problem that we have today. but that problem is going to go away in over the course of the next decade with ubiquitous high-speed charging, with faster charging EVs. We'll be able to get smaller batteries. I've said this on your show more than once that I think once we have ubiquitous high-speed DC fast charging, we're going to start seeing the range on EVs get lower and smaller batteries, because if it's really easy to plug in 10 minutes, get to 80%, on a road trip, then you don't need that big battery anymore. Honestly, I think you're looking at today's landscape and saying, yeah, battery swap would be great, but not seeing that in 10 years, it's going to be obsolete. We won't need it.
All right, let's take a quick comment here from Paul. He says, I don't think 2 minutes is realistic for a battery swap. Well, Paul, I hate to tell you this, that's already happening. And out of the two of us, the only person who experienced battery swap with NIO is Tom, and that was a few years ago, and it was already, I believe, like 5 minutes. But now 6 minutes. But now they've gotten down to about 2, maybe 3 minutes. I believe CATL is also targeting 2 minutes. So no, it's happening now.
And that's if you're not waiting, though, Alex, because don't forget, it's not like you have a battery swap center with 20 bays. I mean, I suppose you could in the future, but right now they're all one bay. So you pull up, you could be queued up behind 10 cars.
I know, Tom, but like once again, I feel like you're making the same sort of let's not bother with electric cars case here, because everybody said that about the Tesla supercharger, saying and they're still having the same problems, but you're not saying let's not have Tesla superchargers, even though people are actually waiting there. You just build more of them. You build out the infrastructure. The gas stations will be converted to half and half, and at some point fully battery swap. So just because it doesn't exist now, or it exists in small amounts, doesn't mean we shouldn't try and scale it up, because otherwise the whole argument about electric cars or any type of progress is really a moot point.
That's a fair point. But there's one thing also that you need to understand. The manufacturers need to be on board with battery swap. If you don't...
You know what cattle do. You know that I just mentioned cattle for a very good reason. Yeah. They are the biggest, I believe, battery cell maker. And they have announced this year that, one, they're making the battery swapping technology, they're making the batteries, and they already made a deal. I'm assuming it's with a smaller Chinese company for a small car, but I'm assuming it's just a pilot program. So it's not just the manufacturers, it's, CATL might come in and say, hey, listen, you can put that in your car now. So, but
the manufacturer has to be on board and say, yes, I want to put your swappable batteries in my car. And I've interviewed representatives at Mercedes, at BMW, Ford, Audi, God, I forget how many companies. And I talked about battery swap over the course of the last 10 years. And like almost every one of them said, we will never agree to battery swapping. Because the only way it works is if we agree to have like a universal size that the cells get swapped in and out of. It has to be something that's compatible for other manufacturers, unless you were to do it all on yourself, like NIO did. And they said, we'll never agree to build our car around the swappable battery, because that's what they would have to do. It's an integral part of the frame of the platform, and pretty much everybody told me we'll never do that. We'll never allow a standardized size battery to dictate the driving dynamics of our car.
Well, I'm going to say to that, obviously, is what the Blockbuster CEO said a while back, saying we'll never do streaming or ship DVDs by mail. So, and I think most of the companies, and even as recently as like Toyota, right, only a few years ago, said, well, we're never going to do electric cars. So basically what I'm saying is that sometimes the market or just one company forces the rest. For example, Apple forced everybody into smartphones. Tesla forced everybody into electric cars. NIO could possibly, or Apple or other companies, force everybody to do the battery swap. And it's not like we haven't fought over standards. Obviously, there is the CCS and CHAdeMO and Tesla and a few other connectors that we're fighting over. And it looks like, CCS is going to win, even maybe over Tesla. But you have to try to innovate. You have to try to move forward. But I think the point that I'm also making is, I don't care how this multi-billion dollar companies do this. They certainly can sit down and agree on something. They can certainly put enough money into this. I don't care how they do it. What I know is good for the consumer is that the electric cars can refuel just as fast, as not faster than gas cars, make it cost less, and make it more convenient. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, you make some good points. I don't believe electric cars have to refuel as quickly as a gas car. Electric cars don't have to do every single thing better than gas cars. They do so many things better than gas cars. As long as we get the refueling time down to a reasonable amount, and as you mentioned before, 10 minutes or so. And as we all know, don't forget, not everybody's going to be charging on the road. You always have to go to a gas station. You have no choice. But with electric vehicle charging, most of your charging is done at home. So most people, if you live in a private residence, if you have the ability to charge at home, you live in an apartment that has charging, most people are only going to use public charging a few times a year. So, it doesn't have to match the convenience of gas. Gas has to be fast because everyone has to do it, and everybody has to do it at least once a week, unless you don't drive much. So, I push back against that argument that people say until EVs charge as fast as gas cars refuel, nobody's going to want them. You could pick any metric you want. You could say, well, until EVs go further than a gas car, until an EV truck can tow more than a gas car, until an EV is quieter than a gas car. You could say you could pick whatever you want. It doesn't have to do every single thing better than a gas car. It can't be much more inconvenient. It can't be an hour where a gas car is 5 minutes. But if we get it down to 10 or 12 minutes to get to 80%, 90%, as far as I'm concerned, that leveled the playing field.
We have different philosophies, but in my philosophy, whenever you introduce a new product, that product has to perform better, or at least the same but cheaper than what's on the market right now to change people's minds. But let's move on to another topic. By the way, I think we disagree even more, and I'm going to base it on a couple of comments here. Cake Batter says, if you had a gas pump in your driveway, how often would you visit a gas station? Then I think Luis Duran says, since I can charge at home, I don't care how long it takes. All right, so fair enough, but I just moved into an apartment complex. And in Silicon Valley, mind you, where electric cars is a thing, there's just Teslas everywhere, electric cars are everywhere. I had a hard time looking for an apartment complex. Forget about affordable apartment complexes would just not have it. This was one of the more luxurious apartment complexes. And of course, thank you to companies like Flow and NeoCharge for me being able to afford it in the first place. But, I had a hard time finding it. And once where there's a dedicated charging station. And once I actually found it, I realized that the charge speed is not even level 2. They said it would be level 2, but it wasn't level 2. And then now they say, no, it's a software update and it's for 5 months. It takes me 3 days to charge my battery fully. And I wish I was actually kidding. So, and majority of people who have electric cars in my apartment complex do not have a spot, including a Rivian truck we just got, do not park they don't have a dedicated charger. So that means all of those people, I would say, probably 70% of all electric car owners in my apartment complex, that in itself is very unique because it does have about 20 charging stations, they charge on a regular basis, not for long trips, on a regular basis, either the superchargers or Electrify America or EVgo. To me, that is, first of all, insane. We need to talk about the infrastructure just for apartment complexes, but it also tells me that these people have even less patience. Like people who travel long distance maybe have a little bit more patience because, okay, well, it's a family trip or business trip. We can maybe sit at the supercharger or Electrify America for an extra 20 minutes. But when you do it on a regular basis, which means once or twice a week, I would say, that becomes a bother and it becomes even a bigger problem. And what do you say to that? How can we fix that? Specifically for just regular people who want to live in regular apartment complexes?
Yeah, so right now the state of public charging sucks. There's no two ways about it. Hopefully, this infrastructure bill will help that because a lot of money is getting put towards it. But you have to understand, you know, EVs haven't been around that long. Yes, we started with this latest generation of electric vehicles maybe 12 or 13 years ago. The Cecil Roadster was kind of the first modern, really good electric car. Then Nissan came out with the Leaf, Chevy with the Volt, which was a plug-in hybrid. So in we really only started putting in public charging infrastructure 6 or 7 years ago. Here in New Jersey, when I got my first electric vehicle back in 2009, there wasn't a single public charging station in the entire state. And not even a level 2 charging station. There was nothing. There wasn't a single DC fast charger until 2014, I think. Maybe a little bit earlier, there were some CHAdeMO units that Nissan put in, but nothing that I could ever use. So, we're not even a decade into installing public charging infrastructure, Alex. It took, how long it took to get gas stations. When gas cars first started getting made, you went to like a local hardware store and got like a quart. You bought it by the quart. It took a while. It's going to take us a little while, but now that we're getting these electric cars, now that the adoption rate is starting to really take off, now that money's getting poured into it, we couldn't expect public or private enterprise to go out and spend billions of dollars on infrastructure when we had a less than 1% adoption rate. But now that the adoption rate is taken off, we're starting to see money get put into this, and it's going to improve, and it's going to improve drastically pretty quickly. You see what Tesla did. What Tesla's accomplished with the supercharger network and their destination chargers is amazing. But they went out and invested the money before the cars were even on the road because they knew that they were selling them. The other OEMs, they weren't going to put their money into it. I think it was a big mistake. I think the other OEMs should have gotten together and done a similar thing to what Tesla did, but they didn't. And we are where we are now. But now that the adoption rate's taking off, we're seeing DC fast chargers being installed across the country. Dozens and dozens and dozens of are being installed every month, and that's they're proliferating now. It's going to take a little bit of time, but yes, it sucks especially if you don't live in a house right now. It's very difficult to find public charging. But you said you don't need to go twice a week unless you drive 500 miles a week. The average, the median range of a new electric car sold in 2022, I think it's 260, 270 miles. That's just the median range of a new EV. So, once a week is really what you need to do. And it can be very inconvenient if you can't charge at home today. I completely admit it, but that's a today problem. I think it's going to get better.
So the infrastructure bill is definitely going to help, but it needs to. The problem, of course, with our government, they allocate a lot of money, but it goes to the wrong hands all the time, right? Like every time we sponsor a war, every time we sponsor the COVID relief, like it's 80% of it goes to the wrong hands. But how do we actually get the money? And really, I don't think it's just about the money, right? You kind of have to say the apartment complexes that are being built, or they're already there. With time, for example, they had to install the fire detectors, the fire, and then the CO2. You have to upgrade things with infrastructure. And speaking of infrastructure, I don't know if you know, but we're having blackouts right now in California. For no other reason.
There were blackouts a long time before there were electric cars. So I hope you're not blaming it on electric car charging.
No, I'm not. Actually, what I'm saying is that before, in Hill, California, we're talking about, our governor signing the bill, no gas car sales by 2035, which is everything's great. But no one's thinking that the emperor has no clothes because we don't even have enough power to go through a hot day that we have right now. I have never seen, now obviously PG&E is a horrible company and all of them should be in prison if you ask me, but they have not updated the infrastructure. They're not updating the infrastructure ever, it looks like. But for example, I lived in cities like Santa Clara, California, and Sacramento, California, where the utilities are owned by the city. Not only it's cheaper, it's just run much better. And I was in Santa Clara, California last night at my friend's house, having a conversation with our little candles, because even the Santa Clara utilities, which I have never, ever seen a blackout from, especially scheduled one, was out of power. We have to address that before we can start talking about, only banning the sales of new gas cars, right?
So, California needs to, I guess, improve their electric infrastructure. They needed to for a long time. But understand this about electric vehicles. Electric vehicle charging is a shiftable load, meaning you can charge EVs at the optimal time. Most people, at least, maybe not 100% of EV charging, but the vast majority of electric vehicle charging can be put off to a certain time. Maybe not when you're on a road trip, but that a small percentage of EV charging has to be done, say during peak time. You need your refrigerator to be running. You need your air conditioning to be running. There's so many things that have to go all day long that you can't turn off. But EV charging is shiftable, and we have to get more stationary battery storage. I think that will help the grid as a buffer. And we also have to shift the load of charging EVs, incentivize charging overnight. And that's what basically California did right now with that they asked people not to charge their cars from 5 to 9 o'clock. Now, all the news headlines just said, of course, the soundbite was California wants to ban gas cars, all EV by 2023. And now they say, don't charge your electric car. But they didn't say, they said, don't charge your electric car between 5 and 9. I mean, that's basically what they said. They didn't say don't charge it. They said, during these peak 4 hours, unless you need to, please don't charge your car then. So, there's a lot we could do with that. And down the road with vehicle to grid, bidirectional charging, electric vehicles, millions of electric vehicles plugged into the grid will actually be a resource for the utilities, because they'll be able to pull power from it, provided you opt into a program to allow the grid to access energy from your battery. And I've talked to many people from utilities across the country, Alex. I've worked with utilities in at least a dozen states, and the long-term outlook is that electric vehicles are going to help stabilize the grid more than they're going to destabilize it and hurt it with charging. Once we have vehicle to grid technology and bidirectional charging, it's actually going to help the grid long term. You can't, we a lot of times we get focused on looking at the present. And I think that's part of the problem with battery swap. We're looking at where we are right now. And I know we have to get to where we're going, but where we're going is going to be a place where electric cars are actually going to help stabilize the grid.
Yeah, I got to tell you, and we don't have time to discuss this. We'll probably for another video. I don't believe that vehicle-to-grid technology has any future whatsoever. I probably don't agree, and that's why we're going to do it some other day. But we're going to take this comment, not even a question, from Mark, who says, Alex is dumb sometimes. I love it when people who watched a couple of YouTube videos think that they're better experts than someone who's been doing it for over a decade and visits the factories and gets into the prototypes. But okay, I'll entertain this idea because he's kind of saying at the end, EV charge at night, not during the day. No, Mark, sweetheart, you got to understand how the world goes around. You can't just charge at night. Yes, if you're just a regular family, sure, you can charge at night. But if you're running a business, if you're an Uber driver, you kind of have to charge during the day. Not everyone's like you, Mark. People work and they have different businesses and they have different schedules and they have different needs. So no, not everybody can charge at night. I will introduce you to a lot of people that will tell you that they have to charge during the day. And I just don't understand why you think that the smarter way of looking at it is to simplify things to what your life is like. So, and, going back to what you said, Tom, is that, yes, I understand we can ask people not to charge during the day, but Americans, we are Americans, we don't want to be told when we can and cannot do that, or when we can and cannot eat hamburgers or charge our cars. Asking people to help each other is just not on brand with America, and I think actually even Europe nowadays. So,
but wait a minute, I'm not asking them to help everybody. I'm saying charge your car during peak hours, pay 35 cents a kilowatt hour. Charge it after midnight, pay 10 cents a kilowatt hour. That's all you need to say. And they'll charge it off peak hours.
Yeah. Well, okay. So we don't have that much time. So here's Do you want to take a specific question, by the way? So here's actually one from Dan. We'll address that, but feel free to pick something out of the chat if you want to talk about something specific. So Dan says, you're asking others to adjust to your needs, Alex. No, actually, I'm asking us, the industry, to adjust to people needs. I think that's been my kind of theme throughout this video, is that we, the industry, whether you're media or you're manufacturers or whatever, you need to actually adjust to what people want. And what people want, and they're actually used to, is getting refueled in 2 minutes. So that's what I'm saying. But look at that, a first super chat in 47 minutes in. But this will cover my entire Chipotle meal. And I do have to tell you guys a dirty little secret, that I've discovered a donut shop on the way from Chipotle to my free parking spot. So now I don't order a fresca and Chipotle, but I get a donut with some tea on the way. But that $20 will cover the entire thing. But Kay Sang says, is there a federal funding? Is there a government body to ensure EV stations installed where needed? I agree. We'll need 2-3 more years for enough EV stations. Tom, you want to take this one?
So I don't know if they're specifically looking at locate where the need is, but I know that there is a body that has to approve any type of federal funding, and they're going to look at a lot of different factors, before money gets issued to, let's say, Electrify America applies or Tesla applies. There's a bunch of criteria that have to be met. So I don't know if it necessarily, if the government's going to say, oh, wait a minute, there's no charging stations 10 miles west of Sacramento, so you have to put one here. I don't think that's the case. And quite honestly, I don't know if the government should be the one doing that the companies that are installing the charging stations that are hopefully want to make money off of them are going to look at the places that charging is needed, because there's going to be high utilization, and that's where they're going to put them.
All right. By the way, let me just address a couple of the ones. All of a sudden, at the end of the video, people are actually submitting good questions, or maybe I didn't see him. San Juan Steve says, but does he have a point? WTF kind of anti-EV title is this? Okay, so you missed the beginning. I will repeat it. I don't believe any party or an individual or company is 100% right or 100% wrong. If you support that ideology, you're probably a cult member. You're a member of one of the cults that we have here. So I'm not. So yes, I played a bunch of things that Trump said that absolutely are not true and bullshit. But what I'm saying is that because he does still represent a pretty big part of the country's opinion, and perception is reality, at this particular point, there is something for us to talk about. There is something for us as the industry to improve. That's why I put that in a title. But you know what? I'll bite on this question from Jason. And, Tom, I guess we're going to have a long discussion in 5 minutes. But, Alex, what is the deal breaker in vehicle to grid? So I don't think people like to be business owners, generally speaking. Just for example, I don't believe the robotaxis will take off because people don't want to run a business of a taxi service or being an Uber driver. That's why Airbnb has not overtaken the world, because most people don't like having other people sleeping in their beds and pooping in their toilets. And in my case, using their bidets, which is the whole level of no for me. So I think this is kind of the same thing. People will not want to use their cars to participate in the utility grid sharing, and even if they're going to be maybe getting paid a little bit for that, they kind of have to monitor how much energy they have versus how much energy they give. Now this is math. This is running a business. It is too much, and I think we'll just put up the batteries on our homes, panels on our homes, battery in our garages that will come down in price. And it will be a separate thing than sharing a battery. To me, it's almost like using my plates out of which I eat, also to put my soap in when I'm not eating. No, I'm gonna have a soap holder and a plate for food as two separate things, and that's just how the universe makes sense to me, and I think a lot of other people. And yet, this is also another change that people will have to learn. I think it's gonna be a lost cause. I know Tom disagrees with me. Tom, you have a floor for a few minutes.
So, as far as vehicle to grid, buying into these programs where you can sell energy back to the grid, it's not something, Alex, that's going to happen all of the time. You would sign on to agree to it when your car is plugged in at home. On occasion, during peak-ish times, they may pull a little bit of energy out of your battery. I think some people are under the impression that their car is going to be used all the time. Like every day, energy is going to be flowing in and out of it, and it's going to wear your battery out. That's just not the case. It's going to be used during times of crisis, during really heavy peak usage periods. And what's going to happen more than likely is, rather than them actually taking energy from your vehicle, they'll just stop your car from charging. Your car might be charging and they'll temporarily pause it because the grid is starting to be stressed. Now, if it continues to get stressed, even though they're pausing all the batteries around you that are signed into this program, but they're still going to have a brownout, that's when, okay, now it's going to start pulling some energy out of your battery. You'll get a text message that'll say, we're going to start using some of your stored energy. Is it okay? Yes or no? Because they won't just do it without you agreeing to it, because you might need that to go somewhere in 20 minutes. I've seen how these plans will work on paper. I know we're a long way from implementing them, but I do think that people will agree to be in them. Not everybody. Everybody doesn't have to agree to be in them. If a decent amount of people does, and there'll be financial incentives to sign on to programs like this, and that's what gets people to participate in things, Alex. Not, hey, be good to your neighbors and save the earth. No, it's, you're going to save money. And it could be, a quarter of your monthly car payment. And if somebody is looking to lease an EV for $400 a month, and they sign up for this program and they get reduced electricity cost and savings of $100 a month, they're looking at it and saying, well, geez, 3 months out of the year my car payments are made. I'll sign. I'll agree to do this. It doesn't seem like it's going to be that much of an inconvenience, and it won't be an inconvenience. So I think more people are going to agree to participate in vehicle to grid than what you seem to think.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. He broke his mic. He turned it off.
I broke my mic. My point is,
whenever I make sense, you fall asleep.
Yes. So here's the thing. You did make sense. My point is that look how long of a speech you have to give to sell it, and it's just going to go right over an average American's head.
You're not giving the average American much credit if they can't listen to somebody talk for a minute.
Absolutely, I am not giving. Have you seen an average American lately? All right, listen, we have. I know.
Rule
I'm
number
not
one
making
on
friends.
YouTube.
I'm not making friends.
Don't insult your audience, Alex.
Yeah, I know. But I think my audience kind of agrees. Okay, so real quick, Mark just wants to be wrong on every single one. So I think Mark is confusing NeoCharge, my sponsor, and Neo, the company that I was talking about, and in no way has ever given me any money. So let me just correct that. But we have one more super chat before we go. I love when people trip over themselves. And this is from Mark. Mark says, thank you for $5 that now I'm able to afford a guac on the side too. What I don't like about the concept is the fear that the recharge and discharge will make the battery degrade more quickly. Good answer, Tom. I don't know if he wants you to comment on that. Tom, do you have anything to add to that topic?
So yeah, if it was going to be used all the time, as I just said, that would be a concern. But it's not. It's it's not. You're not going to be like a power plant for the utility. We're talking once or twice a month, they might pull 5 or 10 kilowatt hour out of your battery. So the way the whole thing works is the grid isn't just relying on all these cars plugged in all the time. They're there for resiliency when there's stress. And the first thing they'll do is either throttle back your charging. Let's say you were pulling 48 amps, they might cut it down to 10 amps for a little while. The second step would be that shut the car off and say, okay, we're pausing charging. We'll continue charging later on when the grid, gets stabilized. And then it gets to, okay, we're going to have a brownout. So let's pull, some electricity from the 10,000 EVs that are plugged in right now in our service district. So it's not going to be that often. And, I've actually talked to Ford about this, because the Lightning now is actually capable of not vehicle to grid, but with the intelligent backup power system, you could use your truck to power your house on a daily basis. You could charge up your batteries overnight when you pay, say, 6 cents a kilowatt hour. And then if your truck's plugged in, you can plug it in, shut the electric off, and power your house. So I talked to Ford about this and said, you're going to let people do this? Is it going to affect the warranty on the battery? And they said, no, we're not going to. They could do it all they want. They could use their house to power their truck to power their house. They could save money on their electric. It's not going to affect the warranty, but we're going to monitor it. And we're going to see exactly how much people use that and how much wear and tear it is on the battery.
Tom, I'm sure we can talk for hours. I mean, I know we can talk for hours, but all I wanted was to not talk politics, talk electric cars, have a couple of different opinions, and have the audience participate. And I think I've accomplished all of this. And we're going to add with Justin, who was willing to pay $5 just to say that he agrees with Tom. I don't think people are aware you're not in the witness protection program. That's actually your name. But thank you for once again hanging out with me. And if people have not had enough of you after this hour, you'll be back on this channel on Sunday. You also have your own channel. I already put a link in the description of this video. Really quickly, in 20 seconds, tell us what to expect out of your next video there.
So I have a Ford F-150 Lightning, so I'm pushing out a lot of Lightning content right now, all different charging videos and so forth. I have a video coming up on how much does it cost to charge a Tesla, because I also have a Tesla Model 3, which I'm selling now because I also ordered a Rivian R1T, and I just got the email that it's ready. So I'm going to be getting that next week, and I'm going to be a 2 electric truck household. I'm going to have the Lightning and the Rivian, and I'm going to do a ton of head-to-head videos. So that's all coming up really soon on my channel. One last thing I want to mention before we go, since we're talking about EVs and charging, I just completed a 1,000-mile round trip in my Lightning, where I drove up to Canada, actually way out to Connecticut. I live in New Jersey, then up to upstate New York, to Canada, and back home. Over the course of 4 days. It was a 1,000-mile road trip, no problems at all. After 250 miles of driving or so, I stopped. That's me at a Denny's. I stopped to get something to eat. I was there for about 45 minutes while I was eating, and the truck got up to like 90-something% from 10 or 15% in 45 minutes. It actually was a piece of cake. I had no problems at all. And I stopped to charge when I was going to stop anyway to get something to eat.
All right. I appreciate. I'm sure we'll talk about it next time. Everybody should go and check out Tom's channel. I put a link in the description of this video. Tom, I will see you on Sunday.
Thanks for having me out.
All right, it's always great to have Tom. Honestly, one of the best journalists and people that I know personally. It's always fun to have him. He'll be back on Sunday, because I didn't feature him on Sunday because, as you know, I had a big Rivian being banned from Rivian video, and Jehu Garcia was actually my guest by accident almost. So, all right, I'm looking forward to all of your comments. Other than that, see you guys next time, and remember to stay charged.